in southern central Kansas. He grew up in a family that didn't take large vacations, and he could count on one hand the number of times his family had been out of state. Family trips were always road trips, and he was in college before he flew for the first time. That first flight was to go to his brother's wedding in Sweden, which meant that not only would this be his first flight, but also his first international flight. In Dave's icebreaker speech entitled "My First Time Flying," he shares his memory of navigating the airport. Please welcome Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. Everybody remembers their first time flying. For some, it's boarding the airplane and the flight itself. For others, it's the end destination that they remember most. For me, what I remember most is getting through airport security and boarding the plane. Flashback, it's 7 a.m. and my mom and I are standing in line at security at Wichita's Mid-Continent Airport. I'm a young college student who's bright-eyed with excitement, but also a little bit nervous because this is his first time flying. And not only do I have one flight, I actually have three. But in front of me, I see a board security guard who motions for me to step forward, and he simply says, "Give me your ticket and ID, please." I simply hand him my ticket, and then, since I'm a college student who's used to campus life, I hand him the one ID I've used the most in the last year, my student ID. He looks at this, hands it back to me, and then looks at me with a slightly annoyed look on his face and simply says, "We're an adult here. You can use your driver's license." I immediately turn a little bit red and fumble my wallet for my license and hand it over to him. He glances at it, passes it, my ticket back, and motions for me to step forward. So I step up to the next line, which is for the metal detector, and I notice that there are several people in front of me, and there's also another rather bored-looking guard who's simply saying, "Take your keys and your wallet out of your pocket and then step through the metal detector." I immediately think to myself, this is going to be easy. There's no way I'm going to embarrass myself on this one. Well, my turn comes. I step up to the metal detector, I pull my keys and my wallet out of my pocket, and I step through, and I immediately hear a bing. I turn and look at the security guard, and he just looks at me and goes, "Do you have any change in your pocket?" I nod and pull a handful of coins out of my pocket and then step back through the machine again. And once again, I hear another bing. I turn to the guard, and he's looking a little bit annoyed with me now, and he simply says, "Do you have a belt on?" I nod, remove my belt, step through the metal detector a third time, and again I hear a bing. He just looks at me, and he's pretty annoyed with me now, and he simply says, "Do you have anything else in your pockets?" I just sheepishly nod and proceed to pull a paper receipt from one pocket, an empty gum wrapper from another, a pen from another pocket, and then realize in another pocket I have another handful of change, which I then pull out and step through, and look at the security guard, and he just shakes his head and motions for me to step on through. I step through, and thankfully this time the machine is quiet. So I quickly gather my belongings, hoping that I don't look as embarrassed as I'm feeling right now, and hurry off into the airport to join my mom, who has already gotten through security and has been watching the entire ordeal. We find our departure gate, and when we get there, the plane is already there, and I realize our first flight is a very small flight. When we get onto the plane, we realize that the plane is actually tiny. There's only about 10 rows, and there's 2 seats on either side of the aisle. And we get to our row, my mom simply turns to me and says, "Do you want to sit by the window?" I think about it for a second, and I respond, "Nah, I'm okay. I can sit in the aisle seat." So we sit down, get settled, and shortly the plane begins to taxi. And the plane comes to a stop, and the pilot simply gets on the intercom and says, "Prepare for departure." And before he's even finished with his announcement, I hear the engines rev, and I get pushed back in my seat as the plane tears off down the runway. A few minutes later, I feel the plane start to motion up, and then a few minutes later, I feel that distinctive bump as the plane leaves the ground and begins to ascend into the air. As we're ascending, I casually glance over at my mom and immediately get sidetracked by the window and the view of the rapidly shrinking ground from it. And I do what any son's going to do on his first flight. I immediately dive over my mom's lap, stick my face in the window, and exclaim at the same time, "This is awesome!" It took my mom a couple of moments to get me to stop laying on her, and then the remainder of that flight was pretty uneventful. We had 2 other flights that day, and I remember on the international flight, I made friends with the retiree that was sitting next to me. In the, I questioned whether or not I was awake in the Amsterdam airport when I saw some person on stilts go walking by me. And I remember dozing through the flight to Stockholm. When we arrived there, I once again was a bright-eyed college student with a lot of excitement, but this time I was excited for all the places I was going to see and all the adventures I was going to do. And that is my memory of my first flight. Thank you.